Hello, it's Tom and Magnolia here, and this is the next Gunnerkrigg side story, Traveller.
Hello there.
So this is a strange one to do. It's an idea that I had for a while that I wanted to make into a short story, but it's pretty far removed from anything that happens in Gunnerkrigg Court, and there's a lot of it also that I think I like that is left up to interpretation, especially the ending and what I hope people take away from the story. It's also sort of personal in the sense that a lot of the imagery is based off where my family lives in Spain and where I would go every summer to visit my mom and my sister and all. And since Path is also from that region of Spain, I always figured it would be nice to just set a small story there.
This is one of my personal favorite stories.
I like how it came out too, but I think there are some elements that I don't think were quite successful, and I guess I'll talk about them as we come to them. But it begins with Path in a Gunnerkrigg chartered private jet here, heading over to visit her family, and it begins with a little flashback that she has of her and her sisters at the beach.
So before we get into the flashback, when would you say this takes place in Gunnerkrigg? Like at what point in the story?
This actually takes place after chapter 31 during that summer break. I guess coincidentally while Annie was in the forest at this point. But anyway, I thought it'd be fun just to start off with Path remembering having a small falling out with her sisters when they were younger. And upon arriving at the Vigo airport in Galicia, she meets back up with her family. And at this point, it will have been about a year since she saw them last.
Did you always have the designs for her family, especially her sisters, in mind, or did you design them for the story?
No, I designed them for the story. I knew that she had a couple sisters, but there was really no need to have had them ready to go for anything other than the story, you know.
Did you have anything in mind when you were designing them?
Oh, sure, yeah. I wanted them to be very distinct. So Jessica, her taller elder sister, I wanted her to be very fashionable and outgoing kind of girl. And her second eldest sister, Adela, is a lot more introverted and the kind of girl that wears baggy clothes and keeps to herself and is very quiet. I wanted it to seem like, from what we saw of them in Path's little flashback here, I wanted it to be kind of obvious that they have changed since then, you know, even if we're just catching a glimpse of them. And as they're just driving back to their house, they're just chit-chatting about, you know, what's going on in their lives. And Jessica, her elder sister, is in a relationship with some guy, and Adela is probably going to school or college to work on metallurgy and that kind of thing. And they're just sort of catching up.
I think what's cool about these stories is they do give little details about the main story, even if they're not technically part of them. Like, here's the first time we see mention that Path's family has received money from the court, I guess in exchange for her attending there, and I guess we can assume that lots of families have that same arrangement.
Yeah, the enrollment process for the court is intentionally very vague, but there's been hints that it's more that the school goes and collects people they find interesting rather than people traditionally apply to go there. And in this particular case, we see that the court is actually, as you say, sending money to Path's family in return for having Path attend the school there, which is a pretty good deal for the family, really.
Oh, and a cute detail that I hope people noticed is that Path is wearing a shirt that we've seen Kat wearing in the main comic, so I guess Kat borrowed her shirt later.
Yeah, she does. It's just a small detail I'd like to add. So yeah, when they arrive at their house, Path realizes they've actually bought a much bigger house. And they still have a smaller cottage that they used to live in, but because of the money that they received from the court, they didn't have to sell that to buy this one. And also it turns out that Panchi, their little dog, has had puppies in the meantime. And so this is just some background information about Galicia, where this story takes place based on my own experiences. But it seems that having pets and dogs or cats or anything like that is handled a lot more casually than many other countries. And it's not uncommon to just have a dog and keep it outside and not really pay it too much attention other than perhaps feeding it when it needs to be fed. And in this case, the dog Panchi was left to have puppies just in a barn. And you do see a few stray dogs around the place, and it's not uncommon to kind of adopt one of these stray dogs, you know, if it's a particularly nice one, and kind of in the way that somebody might adopt a cat who's sort of semi-feral and lives outside and might end up claiming the owner as their own, you know. It's kind of the same here with dogs, and, you know, if you find a dog that you like, then you take it to the vet and get it checked out and kind of have it that way. And that kind of just sets up the situation here where Panchi, the family dog, has had puppies, but the Path's family didn't even really know that there is an extra puppy in this barn that has been left because, as we find out here, its back legs don't work.
One thing I like about Path and her character is that even though she's the girl who can talk to animals, she does have kind of a realistic understanding of animals and doesn't anthropomorphize them. And the idea, it's not that the mother dog left this puppy there because she's cruel in some way. It's just what an animal would do with its puppy if it came out that way.
Well, yeah, I think because Path can talk to animals, she knows not to treat them like humans.
Mm-hmm.
You know, while that might be a common thing to, like you say, anthropomorphize, she understands that dogs, or any animal really, but in this case dogs, have a much more limited understanding of the world and their environment and themselves than humans do. So she doesn't blame Panchi, the mother, for having ignored the runt of the litter, because she understands that is just in dog's nature, you know. But then she does take it upon herself to get him cleaned up and take him for a walk, which is probably the first time he's even left the barn that he was born in. And it was just a chance to draw some of the scenery from the area of Spain that all this takes place in. And Path heads over to the little cottage that her mother mentions that they still kept, and since everybody's moved out, it's all empty and a little lonely. And I kind of wanted to evoke the feelings of coming back to somewhere that you were very familiar with as a kid and seeing it in a new light, you know. And we see that Path's searching for something.
It's nice that in these side stories, because they're not updating daily, you can spend a little more time on moments like this.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that when we talked about The Other Annie in the Forest, and one of the big reasons that I wanted to work on these side stories is so I could try pacing them slightly differently than the main story, which is updated 3 days a week. So in this past sequence of the last few pages, there is no dialogue, and really there's not much going on other than Path walking around and looking for something.
Did you feel like you'd learned a lot about using tones with this one compared to Annie in the Forest? Because to me it looks like you're more confident with them in this story.
Well, it was actually this story that made me realize that I should probably stop trying to figure out tones and just use grayscale instead. Because when this comic was printed, it also came out with some moire patterns on it. Despite me using exactly the same printer, file size, file format and resolution as the comics that didn't have moiring on them, it seemed for me a little bit hit and miss. So with digital printing in grayscale, I found that I didn't really have to worry about any of that. So this actually was the last one that I used tones in. And so with that in mind, I just went back to adding shading as if I was using Photoshop, really.
So I've never noticed him before, but who's that little guy on her shirt?
That guy is the main character from the Chavarine Club, which is kind of a Mickey Mouse club for kids that was on during the summer holidays whenever I'd go there. And it's basically, he's, kind of a cartoon presenter who would just put kids' cartoons on during the day, and it was pretty much on every single day during the summer holiday. And so he was a character I was very familiar with every time I'd go to Spain. I thought it would be cute just to show that Path is probably a member of the Chavarine Club. And this place that she's gone to is a real place. It's a national park called Monteloya, which is a very high peak in Galicia. And once you reach the top, there's lots of, picnic tables and large rock formations and play parks for kids and stuff. But right at the very top, you can see out over towards Vigo and out into the Atlantic Ocean.
I thought it was so beautiful when we went there.
Yeah, it's a nice place to go. Even though there's not really anything to do there, I like to go whenever I go back to Spain. And I have a bunch of reference photos from every time I've been there. But once they get there, it seems that the puppy, who is unnamed throughout the entire comic really, but I guess we can call him Traveller, he is kind of drawn to the ocean that he can just barely smell off in the distance.
I love that drawing of Path holding him. I just think her hair looks nice and it's a cute drawing.
Yeah, and she tries to explain to the puppy, what an ocean is and what a country is. And just trying to explain things to him in very basic terms to help him understand.
I always like things like that in stories, like trying to imagine how you would explain concepts to an animal if you could speak to them in English or Spanish, I guess.
Yeah, I think that kind of thing is fun to think about too. It's kind of a nice exercise to think about how you might interpret a very human concept into the limited perception of an animal. And for some reason we can see that the puppy is kind of drawn to the idea of the ocean. And Path says she'll take him there the next day. And they head back down the mountain. And this view from Monteloya is just overlooking the Rio Minho, which feeds out into the Atlantic, and overlooks Tui, which is the sort of main cathedral town in that part. And just over the river there is Portugal. So Tui's right on the border. I wasn't super satisfied with how the image came out in the end. And I think that comes down to my lack of experience in working just in black and white and cross-hatching. And I think this is probably one of the cases where I would have used color as a crutch and probably tried to convey great distances with like a fading color like I do in the main story, whereas here I only really have pen width and implied lines to really convey that distance. So looking back on it, I'm not sure what I would do differently, but I do feel that a picture like this probably could have been done and better. Not really sure how to describe it. So the next day they go to Patos Beach, which is just west of Vigo, and bring all the other puppies along. And here we can see that the puppies are hiding under a towel. And we can see that the rest of the family is just engaged in their little activities. Jessica's brought her boyfriend along, and Adela is sitting under a tree just on her own.
Is her boyfriend supposed to be a little older than her?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. But still a young man,
Sure, yeah.
And we can see that the puppy that Path's been hanging around with is having a great time here. He's very different to how we've seen him up till now, and he's really just having a good time and kind of awed and amazed by everything and wants to go into the ocean and experience it. And so Path takes him further into the sea in a little inflatable dinghy. And I enjoyed working on this sequence here where they're just lazing around in the water. And I try my best to capture just, the immense amount of light that would be flooding the scene here. And drawing water is just kind of fun. But we do see that the puppy pulls himself into the water and starts to swim away. And Path jumps in too to try and stop him, and this makes the people back at the shore think that she's out there struggling. And Path's father and Jessica's boyfriend quickly run to help. And we can see that the puppy prevents himself from being rescued, I guess, and instead decides to swim away. And with this page here, I tried to show that he's doing it completely willingly, and he's very happy, and probably the happiest that he has ever been.
I think that some people saw this as a very sad ending, and while there's elements of it that are, of course, sad, I don't quite see it that way. Because Gunnerkrigg Court, the whole series is often about different perspectives. And so from Path's perspective, this is something sad and scary that's happened, but from the puppy's perspective, he's full of joy. So at least part of this event is full of joy, and I guess that's just how I see it.
Yeah, and this is kind of the part that I don't really want to, I guess, talk too much about, because this is what I want to leave open to the reader's imagination or interpretation. But the main thing I thought about while doing this is that I wanted it to be clear that the puppy was kind of an outcast and not really able to live in the regular world that his brothers and sisters were. And it wasn't until he came to the ocean with Pat that he had found a place that he fits in better, And really the point about showing him swimming away and then being covered by a wave here is that we really don't know what happens to him. All that we know is that he's gone, he swims away. Like you were saying there, from Pat's point of view, it's pretty sad, but from the brothers and sisters, we see that he has proven himself to be brave and strong, and he's gone off, and he's made his own choice to go off and be somewhere that he's more comfortable. And really the universe of Gunnerkrigg Court is all magical, so who knows what happens to him. And this little sequence at the end here just brings everything to a close and ties it back to the very beginning. We see that Path had been looking for that glass stone that she had in the beginning of the story, and the reason why it wasn't there is because Adela had found it and had made it into a little necklace for her, but because she's kind of a shy and introverted girl, she didn't really know when to give it to her. And so I'm just pulling together a few themes here, like Adela herself not really fitting in, and Path also could be considered a traveller since she is living in a different country. And while it's kind of a sad way to close out the story, we also know that because we see Path in the main story, we see that she's not scarred by this. She's still a very happy girl and kind of well-adjusted. But this is, a moment in her life that she will always remember, and it's just part of growing up and experiencing the people and like animals, I suppose, that enter and leave your life. And this is just one of those episodes.
And it's nice that she has her sisters to lean on in times like that.
And that's where this side story ends. And come back for the next video where we'll be going over Coyote.
Bye!